Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2000 biographical disaster film titled The Perfect Storm. Now, The Perfect Storm runs for 2 hours and 10 minutes long. It is directed by Wolfgang Petersen. It is produced by Wolfgang Petersen, Paula Weinstein, and Gail Katz. The script was done by William Whitliff and Bo Goldman, based on the novel The Perfect Storm by Sebastian Junger. The score was done by James Horner, the cinematography by John Seeley, and the editing was done by Richard Francis Bruce. And the stars of the movie are George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, Diane Lane, John Hawkes, John C. Reilly, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, William Fitchner, Bob Gunton, and Karen Allen. Now, feeling guilty, I never had the chance to see The Perfect Storm in theaters when it was released. I had to wait until it was released on DVD before having the chance to see this gripping, very emotionally charged film that is The Perfect Storm. For a break from the monotony of giving away details, which I have done so in the past, I will refrain from giving away really too many spoilers, but I will tell you how I decided to watch this movie and how I'm recommending the movie community why this movie is something everyone should see in this classic film. Now, before purchasing this movie, I kind of for a long time overlooked it and even ignored at the notion of watching this movie for the simple reason of simply not caring about this movie. Now, I can't say I'm the biggest George Clooney aficionado, though he is a very talented performer, and I guess I can even say the same thing for Mark Wahlberg himself. Now, suffice to say, these two performers are not in this movie for the female demographics to go gaga for. They appear to be somewhat staggeringly quite scraggly and disheveled and looking very overwhelmingly worn out. But hey, what do you expect? Clooney, Wahlberg, the rest of the other gang, they're not playing glorified characters. These guys are not suit and tie office workers doing white collar work. These guys are blue collar individuals working by sea, catching fish, commercial fishing, just so that they could send these fish to the markets, so that they could be put into supermarkets, just so that they could provide food for us. Whether it be for dinner or whether you can make them into sandwiches so that we can have something to eat at work or something like that. I mean, who doesn't love a good tuna sandwich or smoked salmon? Oh yeah, smoked salmon, alright. Or whatever. So I guess to put it into that perspective, there is definitely no Hollywood-like glorification in the movie The Perfect Storm, which means that these guys practically molded themselves from looking attractive to performing in what is to be a rather very unattractive job. But they're out to make a living. And if they don't have a good catch, then then they end up not getting any kind of pay. I mean, these guys are dedicated and committed to their job, even if it doesn't require wearing a suit and tie, and that you have to go out there in the pouring rain, in the deep seas, trying to get that lucky big catch. That's how they're making their living. It's not a glorious job, but it's what they're good at, and it's what they do. And so for for the sake of this movie, I would say hats off to Wolfgang Petersen, George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, and company for making this movie as authentic as it can be. I was 15 years old when the No Name Storm, which was the name of The Perfect Storm, was at the time back in October of 1991. At that age, weather was something that never crossed my mind. I vaguely remembered the events that happened 25 years ago, except that there were, three storms uniting within each other, and that it was one of the scariest natural disasters in the East Coast. When you have Hurricane Grace along with a couple of other torrential rainstorms in it, you get one big, massive monster storm that could be destructive. It could cost millions of dollars in property damage. It could cause people's lives and livelihood. And it could wreck ships. It could wreck cars. It could wreck things like you were playing with toys. But the focal point of this story was centered around the Andrea Gale. Yes, there were two other ships that were also involved in this movie, like the Hannah Boden and the Mistral. But it's the Andrea Gale that suffered the worst fate. And I will tell you right now that this story, it will definitely break your heart. Now, I thought that, now, when I was young and I was 15 years old, the only thing I knew about was the rainstorm. I didn't really know that there was a ship lost at sea in the midst of all this chaos. So then the book by Sebastian Junger came out, and I neglected to read the book as well. And then 9 years later, the movie came into fruition, and then the critics didn't have too much positive reception to it, which I thought was kind of strange. I mean, okay, so I ignored the movie, but then I was wondering, why the neglect? I mean, it couldn't have been that much worse. And then I just sort of scurried through the trailers and the documentaries and the making of the film, and I was nevertheless curious to see what the hype was about this movie. Why was it panned by the critics? Why was it not given the reception? Was it because it was based on a true story and that they went right out of tangent to give a historical accurate description of this movie? I thought that, well, hey, since this is a movie, there is going to be a lot of dramatization. There's going to be a lot of exaggeration about this movie. So why the big fuss? And that, there was also families of the people who lost their lives in the Andrea Gale. They were also pissed off about the historical inaccuracies about this movie. Well, listen, I take deep sympathy to the people who have lost, to the families who have lost, my hat goes off to the families, to the people who lost their lives at the Andrea Gale. My sympathies go out to them, even still to this day. But I think that in itself, by Wolfgang Petersen doing a movie based on the Andrea Gale and the people who worked on this ship who have lost their lives, I think that's still just a satisfying tribute, because at least Petersen took the consideration to dedicate this film on behalf of the people who have lost their lives on the Andrea Gale and the shipwreck of the Andrea Gale. So he wasn't disrespecting the people who lost their lives and the families who had to suffer through the grief. I think that if it wasn't for The Perfect Storm, they would have not given this tribute. Like I said, I won't give away too many spoilers because we all know how a film like this will transpire. But one thing for sure, the story's main focus isn't just circled around the fishing ship known as the Andrea Gale, but about an eager weather reporter who's enthusiastic to seeing the perfect storm materialize on his radar system. Some subtle love subplots, another story about another ship that was saved, the trials and tribulations the Navy encountered that led to the Andrea Gale being swallowed by the perfect storm. So there's a lot to see in this movie. It's not just about a massive storm swallowing up a ship and killing people in the process. There's a lot more to that. And I think that it actually pays respect to the people who have lost their lives and the families who had grieved over the loved ones' losses. And I thought it was cool that these families were portrayed in this movie, and so the studio created special effects to make the scenes all the more authentic. It shows that the crew was really doing their homework here. For a better understanding of this movie, I would definitely like you to see the documentary. It was so inspiring that the crew went out of their way to film most of this movie off the coasts of Massachusetts. We even went so far to go into an actual lobster and fishing boats and even do the occasional dip in the eternally frozen waters to get the feeling of the cold and wetness of this awful storm, and the cold and the wetness that these guys go through in their livelihoods just to make a living. Clooney and Massachusetts' own Wahlberg got the chance to meet the locals who have lost family members who are on the Andrea Gale, and for that I also give a high recommendation to them. They really, really, really showed that they really cared about this project and that nobody should feel disappointed or ashamed of themselves. This is a really good movie. It was gripping, it was tight, and I really thought that they did a remarkable job of doing that. Just by going out to make sure that they know what they're getting themselves into and a better understanding of the characters and the situations they faced or will be facing really shows that there was a lot of work and there was a lot of dedication that was put into making this film. So to summarize, I think I would suggest you all to watch The Perfect Storm. It's both technically done with no stone overturned, and that the performances were very real, and it shows how humans react when natural disasters hit close to home, and where unity comes to life as opposed to divinity as we face in our everyday lives. There's no political differences, no religious differences. No, it's people helping out people in the midst of a disaster. It seems like when it comes to disasters, we throw all our hostilities and our hatred aside to try to help those, because sometimes Mother Nature can be pretty cruel sometimes, but we all have to go out and and stick together as one to provide and help our families whenever needed. But we shouldn't stay united just in the midst of a disaster. We should stay united, and we should all be true to one ourselves in every day in our lives. Let's not let divinity overcome us. Sure, there are times when we will have differences in opinions, but that doesn't mean that divinity means we should hurt one another or we should avoid one another. Because we are all entitled to liking what we like, doing what we like, and believing what we believe in. And it should never be rest on the laurels of being hostile to one another. And I think that's what this movie should be about. And this is how I should feel about the reflections towards being united as a member of the human race. If I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would give The Perfect Storm a 9. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.